They did it. They made a truly amazing Sonic game. And it isn't even a Sonic game. Shadow Generations genuinely surprised me with just how great it is. I always thought it was going to be pretty good at least, but this game turned out to be breathtakingly good. It not only iterates upon past entries, but also innovates with the new abilities exclusive to Shadow. Being a longtime fan of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise and Shadow as a character, this game was truly a sight to behold. I could get married tomorrow and still not be as happy as Shadow Generations made me. The interesting thing is the build-up to hype never really crumbled for me at any point. I still think Sonic Frontiers is a really good game, but you all remember that IGN gameplay reveal. It wasn't pretty. But Shadow Generations not only had me intrigued from the very start, but incredibly ecstatic from trailers and word of mouth from those who played the demo. What made it even more exciting is the fact that it had a chance to redeem Shadow as a character. More on that later. It felt like forever waiting for the October release of this game, but when it did, it felt super cathartic. I stayed up all night playing the Sonic Gens remaster, took an 8-hour nap, binged Shadow Generations for the rest of the day, and I thoroughly enjoyed both portions of the game. Now, I'll be focusing on the Shadow part of the game, but if you want to know my thoughts on the Sonic Gens remaster, it's a good remaster of a good game. And I'm gonna be honest, while the rewrite to the script was a commendable effort, they kind of fumbled the execution in some areas, but I'm not going to really go over that in this video. I'm just grateful we didn't have another Colors Ultimate situation on our hands. Another thing worth noting is the 3-part prologue animation, Dark Beginnings. These were easily the highlight of my week when they were rolling out. It was just so surreal seeing characters like Maria and Emerald being utilized in a brand new piece of Sonic media. Not to mention the amount of emotional impact it was able to have. And I adored seeing Team Dark back in action. I seriously miss these guys together. Go watch it for yourself if you haven't already. They're free on YouTube and I highly recommend it, especially if you're a longtime fan of Shadow. Now then, with all that preamble out of the way, let's finally talk about Shadow Generations. First thing right off the bat, this game looks excellent. Everything looks great, from the animations to the lighting. This actually gives Unleashed a run for its money. This is some of the most fluid animation the series has ever seen. Shadow himself is very expressive with these facial movements and overall body language being much more exaggerated now. And while occasionally there is an animation that's a little more stiff than others, for the most part it's just buttery smooth, and is exactly how the Sonic series was meant to be portrayed. The lighting and colors of the locations you'll visit are such a treat to the retinas. Seriously, the animation department and art directors ought to be proud of themselves with this one. As the kids these days would say, they cooked. One of the things that intrigued me was the story and writing. To be honest, the story wasn't anything too crazy. Pretty much what you'd expect from a Shadow vs. Black Doom plus time travel narrative, and that's okay. Despite its simplicity, it's still able to be super effective with the good theming it has. Somehow, Black Doom returned, and is once again manipulating Shadow. He wants to take over his mind and turn him into his perfect little warrior by giving him all these new Doom powers. Shadow slowly gives into his anger with each new power-up, but Maria talks him out of his rage, like she's always been able to do. Plus gives a reason as to why she named him Shadow in the first place.
Because without light, there's only darkness. But a shadow will show you where to find the light.
It's with Maria's words that Shadow was able to let go of his anger and defeat Black Doom at the end of the day. Had Shadow continued to be driven by anger, he would have been in the position to where Black Doom could corrupt him completely. Again, the story is simple but effective, and even emotional. What really mattered though was how Shadow was portrayed here. Not to sound like a broken record or anything, but during the 2010s, he just lost everything of what made him compelling and was turned into a parody of himself. A classic case of Flanderization. Shadow's always been cocky and standoffish, but genuinely still cared about the people around him. Someone who appeared to be edgy, but really has a heart of gold underneath his cold demeanor. He was nuanced in that way, and recent Sonic media just sort of forgot about that, making him a purely edgy character with no substance. But finally, after years of them not understanding what made the character so great, they got it right. They understood who he was as a person, the way he faces off enemies, interacts with others, and the trauma that's affected him. Gerald and Maria are brought back temporarily, and we see how hard he's been hit after losing both of them, even hoping to change the timeline to bring them back. It genuinely hurt my soul when he realized he couldn't. Maybe it's not the most mind-blowing narrative, but it's genuinely so special seeing this character I've loved for almost all my life getting the characterization he deserves. He may be a hedgehog, but he's still an incredibly human character, and it's about time that goes recognized. Also, at the beginning of the game, he's on the Space Colony arc looking for an anomaly that went detected, but there he also picks up the fake emerald Tails made in Sonic Adventure 2, and just seeing that little bit of continuity is just... God, it's so rewarding. Actually, when he inevitably encounters Sonic in the middle of the story, Shadow gives him the fake one and has Rouge swap it out when the mission is done. See, Shadow needs an emerald in order to use his chaos powers for the gameplay, so just seeing the explanation as to why Sonic got the emerald while Shadow had the real emerald, it's just pretty cool. I am a little disappointed that we don't get to fight Sonic, but I'm not gonna act like I didn't have the stupidest smile on my face during this cutscene. There's also quite a bit of world building in this game. A lot of it is reestablishing what happened in previous games for the sake of a new audience, but a lot of it is completely new information about Project Shadow and the Robotnik family. Like, did you know that the Bio Lizard was just a random pet lizard that Maria had that Gerald experimented on someday? Or the fact that Maria has a sister? A lot of it can be found through Professor Gerald's diary, which you unlock entries for throughout the game. You actually get a physical copy of the thing as a pre-order bonus, but if you got it on Nintendo Switch, the thing's small as hell! Like, I need a microscope to look at this! Here's a free code. So, the graphics are beautiful, the story is good, and the characterization was well done, but how is the gameplay? Dude! This is amazing! The controls, the level design, the new abilities, everything just comes together and creates a genuinely phenomenal experience. I'm not just throwing these words out there for the hell of it, this is genuinely how I feel about the entire game. They pretty much nailed movement down to a T here. It just feels all around tight to control. Correcting your jumps is much easier than it was in Frontier's cyberspace, which is easily the biggest improvement. Boosting also kills enemies again, which is a massive bonus. And also, homing attacks don't take 5 years to execute anymore, which benefits the flow of the game on a massive scale. All around, it just feels like I'm in complete control of the character, and there are so many opportunities to pull off cool tricks. It also feels like they found a good middle ground between the boost formula and the adventure formula. It really just takes what Frontier's established and builds upon it, which is exactly what we've been asking for after that game released. Shadow also gets some new abilities to mess around with too. From the get-go, we have Chaos Control and Chaos Spear. When this bottom meter is filled up from killing enemies or collecting energy capsules, Shadow can use Chaos Control and stop time for about 5 seconds. There are tons of useful ways this can be applied, mostly for making platforming easier and avoiding obstacles coming your way. I do wish there was a way to cancel it mid-use, because sometimes I found myself blocked off and having to wait 5 seconds before proceeding, but maybe that's a skill issue. One thing I will criticize about this ability is that it stops the timer. It's just one thing that makes keeping track of speedrun times pretty difficult. If I beat a stage in, let's say, 3 minutes and 10 seconds, I probably didn't actually beat it in that short, but used Chaos Control liberally throughout my run, which does subtract from your final time. I guess that's really the only caveat though. Chaos Spear can be used to stun enemies or interact with objects such as switches. In a lot of cases, the enemies you'll be hitting are invulnerable to your attacks unless you use this ability. It's nothing too crazy, but it adds a level of strategy to the gameplay, especially if you're a speedrunner. Eventually you can hold down the Y button and unleash multiple spears at once. Utilizing these moves are really fun and gives Shadow a distinct gameplay identity, something I don't think we've seen since 2006. Exclusive to this game, however, are the Doom powers. I already mentioned the upgrade to the Chaos Spear, but there's also Doom Blast, Doom Surf, Doom Morph, and Doom Wing. Doom Blast allows you to kick the piss out of certain enemies, sending them flying in the air, then proceeding to kick them once more, and teleporting to wherever they land. I like this one. It's really fun to utilize, and yeah, I don't know, that's all I have to say. Doom Surf allows you to traverse water, but disables your boost. You're usually going to be sidestepping a lot with this one. The segments it's used in are pretty fun, so this one gets a thumbs up. Now, Doom Morph is pretty tricky. Shadow turns himself into a squid and gains the ability to traverse on this purple Mario Sunshine-esque goop. While you're in this form, he can also hook onto these spheres and either swing around them like Spider-Man or launch himself higher to greater distances. finally, the one that we saw the most in advertising, the Doom Wing. It can only be triggered when you have 50 rings or when you entered a certain scripted moment, and it allows Shadow to glide through the air for a brief period and also makes him invulnerable. It drains your ring count too, and once that's empty, you're done with the wings. It's basically a new super form for Shadow in that way. It's pretty fun going back to past missions and seeing how much can be skipped with proper utilization of this move. Good stuff overall. I'm pretty happy with these quote-unquote gimmicks that don't feel impervious to the flow state whatsoever. And that's really the key to a great Sonic game, a good flow state. And Shadow Generations definitely has one. With this game introducing all these new abilities with buttery smooth controls, this is one of the most fun Sonic games to master. Of course, this high quality of gameplay can only be paired up with high quality level design. And guys, these are some of the best 3D Sonic levels I've ever played. I'm being serious when I say that. All 6 of the main stages with 2 acts each are all winners. With it being another Generations title, all of the aesthetics are derived from past games. Now, I have grown a little bit tired of them just recycling old stages and putting them in new games, but I'll let this one slide. It's a bite-sized experience, and are also using stages that aren't the same Green Hill, Chemical Plants, Sky Sanctuary shit we've been seeing so many times now. Instead, we get to see different stages utilized in HD. Seeing Real Canyon again makes me yearn for a Heroes remake, and Sunset Heights is an amazing interpretation of the stale bread that was Forces. I am a little confused as to why they chose Chaos Island from Sonic Frontiers as a level. All of the other stages are from games that Shadow was in, but he obviously wasn't in that one. I don't mind it too much because it was the only geographically compelling part of the game. The really bizarre thing about this game though is that it has no levels from the 2005 Shadow game. For all the problems that game had, level aesthetics were not one of them. It's actually pretty sad that none of them appear in this game. Sure, the Space Colony Arc level takes aspects from that game, but that one's still technically an Adventure 2 level. They have 2 Adventure 2 aesthetics as a matter of fact, and I think Radical Highway would be on the same level as Green Hill in terms of overused nostalgia, but there's enough really trippy Doctor Strange-esque stuff going on here that I think it's actually okay. Black Doom must have an affinity for this place because he'll just show up in the middle of random levels and take you there. It's pretty neat. And obviously, the level design is just sublime. They have so many alternative paths and entirely different routes to explore. There's always room to optimize your runs of these levels when you have this much going on. Kingdom Valley especially, I don't think there could ever be 2 runs that are the exact same with just how nuanced it is. Everything just clicks together with how well thought out these levels are. I'm genuinely impressed with how amazing of a job they did. Like I said earlier though, each stage has 2 acts, the first one being 3D and the second being 2D. You think I would dread the 2D sections of the game, but nope. The problem with 2D in the past is just how they obliterate the pace of the game and turn them into some blocky, uninteresting platforming that isn't fun to play. But here, that's no issue at all. They're all fun, fast-paced ROMs that don't need an extra dimension to be considered cool. They always keep you on your toes, and they're honestly just as high quality as the 3D stages. In fact, I've seen people say they like the 2D segments more than the 3D ones. And that, my friends, that is a testament. You still have the flow state going for you, and while I would rather replay the 3D segments, they did a great job here, thumbs up. There are these handful of side missions that you also get to do, which I almost forgot to mention. I've heard some people say that they break the pace of the game, but I think they're fine. They're better to have here than not, and they provide unique enough challenges that don't slow down the gameplay at all. The game does require you to beat all of them in order to get through the story, and I do think that's a little annoying, but also I don't really care. Each level also has 3 of these collectible gears. These can be used in the hub world called White Space to unlock concept art, music to play in the levels, and story summaries of past games. White Space overall is very good. It's reminiscent of the open zones from Sonic Frontiers, but that isn't the focus here. It does what it needs to do, take you to the next level while providing unique challenges and collectibles that only elevate how fun the game is. Now, in all fairness, it is a little jarring how similar it is to Bowser's Fury. In fact, a lot of this game does feel pretty similar to it, but that's really only in superficial ways. I like how the main enemy is always visible in both games, but it really creeps me out how the Doom Egg thing is always keeping an eye on you.
This guy's giving me the creeps.
Orbot and Cubot of all people make an appearance here after they were abandoned by Dr. Eggman in Colors. Here, they're building a rocket ship to try to escape the white space, and task you with finding at least 80 of these scattered machine parts around the hub world. These were fun to look for at first, but when you're just missing a few and you've searched everywhere and you feel like your head is gonna explode because the game gives you no guidance on where to look for them, yeah, it becomes a bit of a chore. The big reward you get from building the rocket is a cuckoo clock. A cuckoo clock. Also the remix of Supporting Me from Forces, which is a decent tune, but a cuckoo clock. Yeah, moving on. The bosses were really well done too. BioLizard is back out of necessity, but he has some pretty cool tricks up his sleeve this time. It's not crazy or anything, but it's a good way to expand on some of the mechanics. Metal Overlord from Sonic Heroes makes a return, and in this one you'll be using the Doom Surf to knock projectiles towards him and kick his ass. This is a really fun one to memorize the patterns of and get an S rank on. I just remember my jaw dropping to the floor when realizing Chaos Control didn't affect him until I realized, oh yeah, he kinda absorbs Shadow's powers in the original game. Moving ahead a little bit, I really love what they did with Devil Doom in this game. You're gonna have to utilize all of Shadow's abilities here. The Surf, the Morph, the Wings, and it's all good stuff. Pretty challenging to get an S rank on too. I do wish there was a way to skip this final cutscene before receiving your rank. I had to sit through the whole thing one time waiting to see what rank I got, only to be blueballed with an A rank. This is easily my favorite boss in the game. However, there's one that I skipped over because I found him to be incredibly interesting compared to the other guys. Mephiles. Oh wait, Mephiles! Yeah, I was a little excited when he was announced. Getting to fight him was a very fascinating experience. Before, he was a manipulative, cunning, emotionless, and pretty terrifying villain, managing to be the only one who's ever killed Sonic. Well, after the events of 06 reset and he was erased from existence, he must have slipped off into some sort of pocket dimension outside of time, yet still retains memories of what happened, and he's completely lost it. Here, his whole motivation is to be restored to the timeline, and he is extremely desperate for it. The cold demeanor is just completely dropped as he screams at Shadow about how much he wants to exist.
I want to exist!
Funny thing is, Shadow has no idea who this guy is, but he still kicks Mephiles' ass anyway. I just adore what they did with the character here. Some of these line reads almost make you feel bad for what is basically the embodiment of evil. His theme also goes kinda hard, as do most tracks in this game. To be honest, this is one of the less standout 10 out of 10 Sonic soundtracks, but when you're competing against a franchise like this, I think that's okay. It still has some really amazing tunes that'll get your head bopping up and down while playing the game. Also, I love listening to the music in white space and hearing various motifs from Shadow's past. And that's Shadow Generations. If Sonic Frontiers proved to me that Sonic games can still be good, this proved to me that they can still be great. This was some of the best Sonic gameplay I've experienced in such a long time. This was such a treat as someone who was a massive fan of Shadow the Hedgehog. He was my favorite character when I was a kid. In fact, I'm kinda pissed that this game didn't come out when I was 10 years old. He would have flipped his lid over how cool some of this shit is. They did the character long deserved justice in this 3-hour game. And that's my biggest complaint, it's too short. Well, at least we're getting the movie 3 tie-in level later on this year. Hopefully that means more levels in the future through DLC, but I'm not holding my breath over it. It's incredibly bizarre seeing a new Sonic game with this much unanimous praise. I don't think I've ever seen reviewers and fans alike this positive towards anything Sonic related. This really does set a precedent for the franchise from this point on, or at least I hope it does. This was a short, high-quality experience that didn't bloat itself with unrelated gimmicks. Don't get me wrong, I do like some of these alternative gameplay styles, but they were never really what I look forward to when playing these games. But Shadow Generations just let the main gameplay and level design do all the talking. It stuck true to Sonic, but still allowed room for experimentation. The story wasn't complicated, yet it was still full of heart and sincerity. I'm just so happy with this game, man. The metaphor Maria used earlier to explain Shadow's name feels like it describes this game in general. This Shadow showed us where the light is, and I'm proud of him. Notice how Sonic games started getting good again when they're not afraid to include Big the Cat? That's literally not even a coincidence.